Hello, Kak. Am I audible?
Yep, you're loud and clear.
Okay, if I get disconnected, please do tell me. My preferred gender pronouns are he, him, and I'm starting the speech in 3, 2, 1. Panels, as progressive athletes, we understand that there's lots of human rights violations and disenfranchisements that happens towards minority groups. Not only that, economic disenfranchisement that happens because of China's ambition at trade war from Xinjiang and also other cases that happen there. This is why we regret that these actions happen. We think that boycotting these Olympics, the 2022 Beijing Winter Olympics, is a way and a mean we can use to show our stance, regardless of whether or not, for example, the outcome would be that significant. And we think that this is still something that we should resort to. This is why our side house is proud to propose. What is our census debate? First, we believe that as progressives and as progressive athletes, this is something like boycotting is something that's in line with our interests. But here's what you have to understand. We don't think that in either side, a direct impact in which they would stop, for example, the disenfranchisement, the kinds of genocides, the allegations and whatnot would probably happen. But at least this is a means to show our stance. This is why we think that we should opt into it so we can embody our stances and we can walk the talk and show our stances as progressive athletes. Second, we think that we should also boycott because we think that as athletes, the moment we do not do these kinds of actions and still join these kinds of Olympics, we're going to be complicit in the disenfranchisement that happens, further elaborated in my arguments later on. How are we going to do this under our said house? First, we're going to basically full boycott the Olympic that is going to happen. How are we going to do this? We're going to create public statements, that is to say that we're publicly not going to support, for example, these kinds of Olympics. We're also going to publicize this, for example, on mass media, use Twitter, Instagram, or whatnot, our personal accounts and whatever. And we're also not going to join the Olympics in the end of the day, not engage with whatever activity is going to happen there. We're also going to do this as a collective action, so we can actually, for example, galvanize more power, or we can raise, for example, more awareness about the kinds of issues that happen or disenfranchisement that happens inside of China, for example. Understand that the fiat in this debate is that the athletes that are going to boycott are only athletes that come from countries who already do a diplomatic boycott. So this debate is not about athletes forcing their countries to take a negative stance towards China. This is not a burden that we have to prove in this debate. With that in mind, I'm going to move on to my arguments, two arguments that I'm going to talk about in my speech. First, basically, I'm going to talk about why China is a bad actor and why we should actually boycott them for that. But second, I'm going to talk about why this is in line with the interests of progressive athletes, why, for on the point that I've proven that I've talked to you before about the complicity of these actors and these athletes when they actually join these kinds of Olympics. First argument, why China is a bad actor and why supporting them contradicts the progressive values. Understand that China is a bad actor that enacts certain policies that really contradict the interests of progressive values. That is to say, for example, to uphold human rights values, to make sure that no one, for example, feels that they're discriminated and everyone, for example, feels safe. Everyone is able to, for example, deliver their like thoughts and whatnot without the fear that they're going to, for example, be criticized and they're not intimidated by doing that. Understand that China is a country that enacts policies that contradicts directly with that. This happens with the Xinjiang, for example, genocides, the trade war that happens and minority disenfranchisements. Understand too that the trade war has severe economic disenfranchisement that harms the lives of those people that are involved in the trade war because, for example, in the trade war, there's certain embargoes, for example, that happen or certain economic trade-offs that in the end disenfranchise the lives of people. We think that all these kinds of precedents shows to you that China is a bad actor, and when we support these actor, we contradict our progressive values, and which is something that we really want to amplify to begin with. This is why, firstly, we think that this is justified for us to boycott. But second argument, why is it in line with the interests of progressive athletes? Understand that as progressive individuals, not as athletes, we actually inherently believe with these progressive values. Political belief of progressive individuals are in separate parts of human beings, and this is like their moral compass. It's something that's uncompromisable. Understand, this is why it is important for because there's a demand for consistency, for example, that exists in the status quo, for you to walk the walk and, for example, embody your kinds of stances. This is why we think that when it's something that's uncompromisable, you really have to actually live out your, for example, stances, regardless of whatever career you take, regardless of whatever background that you actually have. But then specifically, why as athletes we're going to be complicit, and why then it's our interest to actually stop joining or boycott. Understand that we're complicit in these kinds of disenfranchisements for three reasons. One, understand that Olympics is unique to a country because it is used for a means to an end for example, tourism, rising up your GDPs, for example. And you as a country, for example, you want to get more media deals, media exposure, you want to invite more people inside your country. This is what's unique about Olympics. And this is why, for example, certain countries would take or would like have to spend much money on bidding and they're interested in that. It's because of these kinds of benefits. Understand then, athletes are the attractions that people go to watch inside of Olympics. Like you watch a swimming like tournament, for example, a basket tournament or whatnot. In one way or another, you're complicit because you are supporting, for example, the interest these countries have, and you are giving them benefits that you shouldn't give in the first place because you do not want to support their causes, their stances. Second, understand that Olympics disenfranchises people that are marginalized. Why is that so? Because in the construction of stadiums, for example, and the construction of certain facilities that are needed for Olympics, in which usually countries build these just a few like months or years before the Olympic happens, they use lots of contractors, for example, who are underpaid, and the work conditions that are given and that are enacted are work conditions that are very inhumane. Understand this is the precedence with what happens in Rio Olympics. But because I've proven to you that China is a bad actor, understand that that harm is much more amplified specifically because China is a bad actor. Understand that this is also much more amplified because China not only is a bad actor, also does not have accountability and check and balance inside of their economic and political system. This is why, for example, disenfranchisement is more likely to happen. But lastly, why do we think that this is also going to be complicit? Is because when you engage and join inside of these competitions, you're going to say nice things about the country, thank the country, and be nice about these countries. This is why we think that this contradicts our stance. It's not our interest to actually like support them and engage. Why is this bad? First, because we're seen as a traitor towards our own stances, towards the parties that we're in, to our progressive communities that we join in. Second, if we enter, we're complicit in strengthening the system that marginalizes the people that I've proven to you before, the minorities and whatnot. This is definitely not in line with our interests. We should boycott. But then, if you win or if you lose, first, if you win inside of these Olympics when you join, understand that when you win, your whole career is going to be associated with the fact that your Olympic, for example, was in China. Your name and brand would be associated with Chinese Olympics. This is bad because it creates some sort of feeling of guilt inside of you because your win is on the result of the shoulders and at the cost of certain disenfranchisement. But also understand that if we lose, it's going to be wasted effort, mental stress, and you're going to, for example, get bad precedents because of this. Understand then, we think that then it's justified for us to publicly boycott because it fulfills our interests and it's in line with our interests. We're very proud to propose.
Thank you for the fine speech. Now to open the case of negative team, calling upon first speaker of negative, floor is yours. Here.
Test, can you hear my voice?
Yep, you're loud and clear.
All right, let me just open my timer. Begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Oh wait, 3, 2, 1. The heart of the Olympics belongs to the sports that celebrates the athletic capabilities of those who participate in it, to celebrate mankind's progress of athleticism in the worldwide stage. And we, as the negative side, believe that we should not boycott the Winter Olympics in Beijing, as we believe that we also believe that progressive athletes have to understand that the ambitions of other athletes and participants are important to the cause. I would like to bring two things into this argument. First of all, is the core value of the Olympics and how boycotting it negatively affects those the core values. And two, how boycotting this, how as a progressive athlete, you are betraying your own country when you boycott the Olympics. But before that, I'd like to respond to one of the points that the affirmative side has brought, which is that China is a bad actor with horrible policies. These horrible policies are something that is known worldwide and accepted at this point. However, sports is sports that should not be intertwined with political interest. The heart of the Olympics are in the athletes. Boycotting the event will only remove the heart of the message without actually directly dealing with these policies that these progressive athletes are against. Even when progressive athletes don't participate because of China, China will still have China won't immediately China won't feel like they need to stop whatever they're doing because of it. They will just feel like they were betrayed by the China committee, and they will actually take action, as they will also still have enough capita or profit gain from hosting the actual Olympics, even when some progressive athletes are boycotting it. So one of my first argument on how the core value of the Olympics is to celebrate the athletic capabilities of mankind, and how boycotting it removes that core value. So why do athletes join the Olympics? Athletes in general train their entire lives to even get the chance to qualify for the Olympics, let alone actually qualify and get accepted to participate in the Olympics. The Olympics is such a high prestige because it happens once every 4 years, and not only that is that you get to compete with the best of the best that the world has to offer. Athletes come to the Olympics to compete with the best of the best from the entire world, to compete for the spot as one of the best in the world. Why is this important? This is important because even as progressive athletes, you need to understand that there will be athletes who are not progressive, or those who don't really care about what China does, that came to the event for the specific reason of these core values of the Olympics. They want to compete with the best of the best. Why? So they can gain the exposure, the profit, the sponsorships that come from these achievements. This is a requirement for these athletes, because that is the crux of their lives, to make a living for themselves and their family by competing as the best. And another part about competing in the Olympics is that by these progressive, a lot of the best athletes come from the progressive countries, such as the US, Canada, and so on. The problem with them not participating, these athletes from progressive countries not participating, is that the other athletes that are participating in the country will never get the chance to be there against the best, to prove that, hey, I'm just as good as them, I can beat them, and so on. Now, and that's very heartbreaking for these athletes, because they might not get a second chance. The Olympics only happens every 4 years, and you might not be able to qualify for the next Olympic event. They might not be able to qualify, as plenty of athletes have a one and done shot, or even this Olympic might be their only chance they have left. Another thing to bring up in this athletic point is that why do you not want to associate with China as athletes? So what I mean by that is, even as a progressive athlete, why do you not want to win the Olympics just because you don't want to associate with China? We don't think that athletic achievement should be intertwined with the policies. Just because you won the Olympics or you lose the Olympics to China or against China, you don't immediately win. You don't immediately get labeled as a Chinese supporter because you won an athletic event. You didn't. So you don't necessarily directly support these policies that China has. The Olympics at the core is the only avenue for professionals to get these exposures, and the progressive athletes and the government can't just neglect it for the sake of politics. This, at the end of the day, is not a political event, and they didn't choose China. Right? The Olympic Committee didn't choose China because they support what they're doing, other than that they see that China economically and infrastructurally wise can support to hold the Olympics. They can afford to have these infrastructures, these stadiums, and maintain them. Unlike, for example, Brazil, who after the Rio Olympics, a lot of these facilities got abandoned and unmaintained. They see that China is capable of doing it, and for a completely sports reason, they should. The second point I'd like to bring up is that you will betray or at least create hate and distrust towards the athletes of your own participating country. Like I said before, Olympic events only happen once every 4 years. The citizens look forward to these Olympics logically because this is the chance for their country as their student to show, hey, our athletes are the best at the best. Hey, we can compete with this. And by saying that, by qualifying and being so close to the actual Olympics itself and saying, sorry guys, we know you love us, we know you support us, but we don't like China, so we're not going to participate. That's betraying your fans because these fans, even if they do understand your stance, which they might not, they want to see you perform at the best and show the pride for your country. By boycotting, these athletes are letting down the people that support their every step towards bringing home pride for their country. And for these reasons, we believe that this motion should fall. Thank you.
Thank you for the fine remarks. Now to continue the case of government, calling upon second speaker of affirmative, floor is yours. Here.
Hi, am I audible?
Yep, you're audible.
All right, cool. Just setting up my timer. Okay, gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. 2 clarifications before I move on, right? First, I think it's important to note that as a progressive athlete with the emphasis on progressivity, we've explained to you that usually political values in the current political climate is usually a huge part of an individual, right? That is to say, in the current age of accessibility and technological information, it's hard for you to find people who are entirely unpolitical, especially when they already brand themselves as a progressive person. Usually it becomes a huge part of their nature because one, they're usually stuck in a social media that amplifies the same narrative, for example, of progressivity, the echo chamber that further empowers their progressive nature inside them, making them even more progressive, even certain in their progressivity. 2, the reason why people become progressive is usually because they see structural harms that happen in society that usually harms the most vulnerable, making them feel a sense of camaraderie with people who are harmed by the system. That's why they feel like a drastic progressive change is the one that ensures any kind of protection. But 3, it's important because in the age of polarization on which that if you break ranks from your political party to the other side, if you compromise at all, if we're talking about US, it means it's going to cost you the party as a whole, for example, on which that party solidarity is very, very important. It's very hard then for you to buy ops arguments saying that, oh, why do you have to sacrifice progressivity for your career? Because it's a huge part of your individualism. It's a huge part of your sense of self that then it becomes just as important, if not more, than just mere profit alone. Ops burden then is to prove to you why we need to discredit all of those things in comparison to economic, right? But okay, moving on. 2 points I'm going to talk about, right? One, I'm going to talk about why then sports and politics cannot be separated. But 2, I'm going to talk about why how the accumulation of capital, something that opposition cares so much about, is better for the athlete and for the progressive party when you go with government, right? First things first, why sports and politics cannot be separated. So Ops says, hey, it's not necessarily a political thing. Why then should we care about the political issues of China? It's just people playing balls or whatever, right? This is not true, right? 2 explanations. One, I think that sport is never neutral. It was historically used as a political means for minorities to gain leverage, for example. Black runners showing up to the podium, showcasing the strength of the minority, the abilities of people who are already structuralized so much, but still is able to show up and to these white boys, showing that they're also as powerful. It is a way for us to show our power, for example, because the actions that we do during this sporting event is a way that can be utilized, for example, for political leverage in the future for the Progressive Party. Similarly, then, if you're a progressive person and you show up in a podium that is created on the shoulders of Chinese workers who are underpaid, Xinjiang workers who are kept in camps without food and sunlight, for example, you are inherently complicit to the harm that is created in the creation of that particular event. That's why, as a progressive person, we need to negate that kind of harm, exactly because sports, the creation of it and the impact of it is all a result of a political thing. But secondly, I think that we think that sports is a political matter. Sports is a political matter because specifically in China, there are already political discussions on which that lots of countries don't want to politically engage in the international diplomacy with these Olympics, showcasing the harm of China that is already agreed upon by multiple countries on which the sportsman comes from, which means that when they do or they don't engage to the Olympics is a huge political matter because it means whether you're consistent with your country or not, whether you support the decision of your country, of the people that you elect or not, right? So this particular Chinese Olympics is a huge political event which means that if you do engage, you're already politically complicit. That's why ops harm cannot stand. Extension, right? How this will accumulate better capital for the athletes and the progressive country, engaging directly to LO's profit point. When the athlete decides they will reject to join Olympics, the decision, of course, will be public and popular. Two reasons why it's going to be very popular, right? One, assuming that athletes usually have a sort of celebrity status, especially in progressive countries, we see people like Kobe Bryant or Naomi Osaka or whatever who have media attention and everything, means that it's going to be very, very huge. But secondly, media specifically likes it when celebrity being political because there's lots of engagement from both sides of the political spectrum. This means that the decision will more likely create a stir in society, especially when you reject such a good opportunity like what OP says to join one of the biggest sporting events in the country for political reasons. Why is this good for the athlete? Two reasonings, economy and political. Economically, it's good because not only do you save expense for travel and registration fees, you are economically better off because you are seen as a beacon of progressive ideals for the progressive brands. This is good because of three reasons. One, current political climate means lots of brands becoming super politicized, especially when they note that lots of the middle to upper class usually resides in the leftist political spectrum. For example, lots of conscious brands want to endorse you because they feel like you are consistent with the LGBT plus ideals, with the environmental conscious ideals, with the pro-minority and those kinds of things that brands like Nike, Adidas, and whatever are trying to champion. But two, the hatred and suspicion towards China is not just a progressive issue, but a popular mainstream belief that is held by both sides of the political spectrum, the right and the left. This makes you even more popular if you're one of the first artistic progressive person to come out and say that, oh, I don't want to go to China and so on and so forth. This is good because it means that you are more popular. The brand deals that comes to you then isn't just for the very left, but also to everyone because you are now not just a political figure, but a very lucrative athlete who can endorse their brands very, very well. But thirdly, your political stunt separates your identity from a US athlete to a celebrity status that has media coverage that is separated from your athleticism. This is good because you have a more sustainable career because now your capacity and your bankable traits, whether your lucrativeness is separated from whether you perform good or not as an athlete, but also your progressive ideals, something that is more sustainable because athletes can suffer, injuries or so on and so forth, making your career usually very unstable. The fear of economic instability is something that's big in athletes' experience. When you are separated from that, you have another thing going on that makes media care about you outside of your athleticism. You have more sustainable source of income because now you're also a political celebrity figure as well. The comparison on OP and negating all of their benefit is that they only get sponsorship deals when they join Olympics if they win, because that's the only way you're able to do it, which is bad, right? Because winning is only like 1 in 3 spots, for example, which is very, very small. It also depends on the type of sport that you play. Some sports have better brand endorsement, some sports do not. It has lots of externalities, very, very small margin of success, therefore less certain for you to get the same benefit on OP. Second, political. If you're going to strengthen the progressive movement, when you are publicly boycotted because of your values, people will applaud you and applaud the strength of the movement, right? Because progressive mainstream media in the West already frames China to be bad. But secondly, it shows that you as an athlete is willing to sacrifice yourself for what is inherently is right, fighting China and the communism or whatever. This makes the Progressive Party look more solid, right? Because one, you're able to shrug off attacks that progressives are detached from reality. But two, you make progressive values penetrate into a political bubble, because now those who might care only about your sport now knows about progressive values as well, exposed to the discussion, more likely chances of them changing to progressives in accordance to your value. Proud to propose.
Thank you for the fine speech. Now to continue the case of opposition, we're calling upon the second speaker of negative team. Floor is yours. Here.
Hold on, let me set up my timer first. Ladies and gentlemen, we still think that sports and political views should be separated, right? So a few responses to the opposition, as to the government side of the house, is firstly on the point of why is it, when they say that why is sports is a very integral part of political is very intertwined with political interests. We think that the point or the vocal point of Olympics in itself is about the athletes, right? So boycotting the event will only remove the. We know that the main focus of the message without actually dealing with these policies that are progressive athletes are against, or because we think that as a progressive athletes, we don't have any sort of power to actually change the the oppression that CCP has been conducting for years. So what we can do in the social media campaign is only about activism, right? But we see that in reality that even with the high power of the the push from the democratic countries such as US and Canada, the CCP will not even does not even change their stance on Xinjiang and human rights activities that they have done. It means that even that even these small actions will not actually be impactful, and it will still be a waste anyway. Secondly, on the idea of camaraderie, so the government say that it will be it will create camaraderie with the victim of Xinjiang province in China. But we say to you that camaraderie with victim will not actually happening, because people in Xinjiang don't have access to internet anyway, so they cannot see what you're doing on your activism and those things, right? So your target market will not actually see you doing those things, and it will be a waste anyway. So okay, so let's just jump into the best case scenario. What if even sports actually intertwines with politics, like what they say that historically people use sports as somewhat to use like their political stance or their as a powerful minority groups and such things. We see that it's actually still beneficial on our side. Why? Because if we look at China's interest at the first place, is China is very ambitious about their athletes' rights. So if we look at the history, China will always will put pressure on their athletes about they have to get gold medals and such things, and they have to to get the majority of the medals in the Olympics from the very first place. So we think that if we do not jump into these competitions as an athlete, it will only hit their ego, because means that because nobody will compete them anyway, and like everybody just surrenders because China will perceive them as like other countries are less than them, because they cannot do not even want to compete for the gold medal of the Olympics anyway. So we think that if you're progressive athletes that can be successful and get the medals in Olympics, it will actually show that to China that you as as a progressive person can still be dominating the kind of these achievement and some sorts, and it will not be you're not complicit to China's rules about the rules about that Chinese athletes have to get all of those medals, right? So moving on to my extension, it's about the economical benefits. This is also a response to the government side of the house. So they say that if you are a political figure and also an athlete, the brand deals will still coming to you and stuff, and it will be more sustainable. But the affirmative never really explain to you and give you examples on how it will be sustainable, because we see that even when David Beckham do not compete in sports like right now, he still get many brand deals and stuff because of his like one legendary goal in the some kind of football league, right? So we think that under that this argument was never proven at the very first place, but we want to elaborate more on this. We think that winning a competition, for instance, like one of the major competition is that as like Olympics is very important for these athletes, because moreover for those who do not boycott them, because they need exposure, right? They need profit and they need sponsorship. So those sponsorship and athletes are like very momentum based, right? It for some people are very momentum based. So we think that as an athlete, we need to use that kind of momentum to get as much as brand deals and sponsorship as possible. And why is, as a political figure, you will not get as much profit from this brand deal as possible, right? So because we think that the pressure of as an athlete, pressure of coming to you to be very harshly actively campaigning about these issues is not as much as your pressure to be to be a successful athlete, which means that you have like your pressure to get medals is far more larger than the pressure of you being a progressive person, right? So I think that under because of this, the brand deals will not happen, and we never see brand deals that actually like brand deals that are supports you about your political view and stuff, because these brand deals will only see you for your achievement and your skills, right? And the only way to showcase your skill is to join the Olympics, right? So that's for once. And secondly, we know that Olympics is the only avenue for professionals to get significant exposures, because the concentration of sports world will be shifted, and these athletes will get highlight. The government neglect just for the, when the government neglect them just for the sake of politics, means that these athletes don't have a place for them to thrive. Other than economical pursuits, we think that these athletes also have, a dream, right, to be a medalist, for example. So this is the only chance, and it's a end goal of some people at the end of the day. So we think that this will cascade into less appreciation for athletes to make. That makes people will be uninterested in becoming athletes at the very first weekend, because you can easily get boycotted by the government. So under these two arguments, we're proud to oppose.
Thank you for the fine speech. Now to close the case of government side of the house, we're calling upon government whip. What is yours? Here.
Test. Am I audible?
Yep, you're audible.
Okay, cool. Let me pick up my timer. Okay. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Just immediately, two things I'm going to talk about in this debate. One, on the principle level, why as an individual, your political belief is important and why this is the best way to portray your political belief. Second, regarding what then are the side harms and benefits, talking about how then you best respond to like how best you respond to China's oppression currently. But second, also talking about like the economic benefits and how you sustain yourself as an athlete, right? But before that, one clarification. Here's the thing. If you want to talk about camaraderie and so on and so forth, these are things that are reinforced by the organizing committee of the Olympics and whatever body is responsible for holding the Olympics, right? That means that the fact that they made leaving a competition a possible option and there are rules and regulations about it means that they do acknowledge that sometimes these things do happen and it is within the right and it's normal for athletes to make political statements and to leave a competition for their own benefit or for their own political statement, right? So for all these things, I don't think that it's that impossible or that against it. It's something that has already happened before, but we already explained to you regarding why then it's going to be marginally better and a lot better, right? So first, in the class regarding principles and what they say as the core values, right? What did they try to tell you? They try to tell you regarding how then athleticism is important, but the way that they elaborate it is by saying that other athletes cannot take your spot. It's very heartbreaking for those athletes, right? First, on the comparison, comparing the athletes who already live in superpower nations with lots of welfare in comparison to the Uyghur and Xinjiang people who are currently like oppressed, they don't have the kind of media and they don't have the journalists and the freedom of media to like publicize the oppression that they're going through and to publicly ask for help. So I already see like that's already like very on terms of importance, one is a lot more important than the other and it's not the actor that they're defending, right? But furthermore, understand that athletes have a right to expression and a right to political belief and they have the right to exercise those statements, right? It's important for a democracy because that's the very political system that allows for them to have all the powers and all the benefits that they currently have, that they are even able to become an athlete at all in the first place, that they have the freedom to choose what kind of job they want and to have benefits and welfare towards the job is only like accredited to the democracy that's running in the country, that the people have the interest into making sure that they live well. Therefore, as a progressive, you're sympathetic because you understand, as a humane person, you understand more intensely than other people what the people in Xinjiang are going through, right? Because these things are important, these things are time sensitive, exclusive, because not a lot of people have the ability and privilege to speak up about these issues, but also understand that the movement has very limited resources to actually exercise all these things, right? And furthermore, I think the conflict sometimes becomes personal, right? Because when you're an immigrant coming from India who already moved to the superpower nations and then become an athlete, having to see the country that constantly try to push the country's national borders to the point where they currently oppress the people and attack them with weapons, and also talking about Black people who see that their fellow Black people inside of Africa are being trapped into exploitative deals and so on and so forth, it becomes all the more important that they take a stand against China and what they're currently doing, right? But furthermore, it's not their fault or responsibility that other athletes were not capable as they are, right? It's true that not everyone qualifies, but that's not their fault that these other athletes do not qualify, right? If it's anything, it's okay as a drive for like all these other conservative athletes or the other athletes who just want glory to win. But furthermore, we think that in sportsmanships, they value your own personal integrity and your other values in comparison to glory and economic benefit, right? This is consistent with how, for example, there's a ban on steroids because they want you to compete very honestly. But second, there's an enforcement of fair play to ensure that there is no like some sort of sabotage or some sort of hurting the other athletes for the sake of your own personal gain, right? We don't think that this is all the more exclusive, understanding that there are literally so many other sports tournaments, right? It's never exclusive. Even outside of the Olympics, you have tournaments that are specified towards the very specific sport. For example, if you continue skiing, there's multiple skiing tournaments available abroad and so on and so forth. So there are many avenues for you to fully showcase your strength in that particular field. But when they try to tell you that Olympics didn't choose China to support it, but because they have the infrastructure to support it? Well, exactly, right? This just proves to you how there are already so many lobbying that China has done towards the Olympics officials, towards the underdeveloped nations like ASEAN to allow them to host it, and also to individual star athletes like Econdis. It's all the more important that we take a stand to make sure that they don't have too much power, they don't have too much leverage to continue doing the atrocities that they have done until right now, right? But second, Clash, regarding the practicalities, they try to argue to you regarding how, oh, at the very end of the day, these people cannot see what you're doing. Xinjiang people do not know what you're doing, so that's not their target market. Let's really point out to us where within our arguments that we're talking about like how we want to influence the Xinjiang people, right? Because what we want to influence, we understand Xinjiang people in Xinjiang are powerless. What we want to move is the people within our own countries who have the power to vote for the different governments, the people inside of other countries who are currently like considering whether or not they want to strike an economic deal with China and so on and so forth, right? But even then, even if it's for one person, the goal is for your own domestic belief, which is like if the country probably already did not want to send a diplomat and a diplomat substitute there, then that means they probably also don't like China nationally, but also your own conscience, right? But even then, we believe in the butterfly effect, right? You never know. Multiple individual efforts that brings a huge impact. For example, how this one people might research about the Uyghur oppression because they want to research why you dropped out in the first place. That will create trending topics and then push the topic of the Uyghur oppression into the first rank. Second, the courage for younger athletes to take a stand and to make statements because they see that as a senior, you were the first one to do it and they can follow in your footsteps. But three, for the common progressives, it's a wake-up call, right? To do actions that are within their power and to do something concrete that will actually help these people, right? This is all the more important because in the progressive spaces right now, there's a detachment with what happened in the current status quo where they live in their own political bubble, right? Compared with their arguments, right? What did they try to tell you next, right? They try to tell you regarding how, oh, one legendary goal is enough because it's momentum based, right? On our side, we've already talked and characterized very well inside of the DPM regarding how we're going to infiltrate a political bubbles. In their very best case, their momentum is very short lasting under the reasoning that it is only until a newer, younger athlete does better, right? Your mark in history is an easily forgotten number, right? Just because you can do this well in 10 seconds doesn't mean that in the future there's not going to be another athlete that does it in 8 seconds, right? At least on our side of the house, there's more impact because you are the sole living proof that politics and sports reflect each other and are intertwined with each other, right? Therefore, you're not only going to be discussed inside of sports spaces, but also within political spaces regarding how you're able to take a stand and like make a change and impact on these people's lives. But even when they try to talk about how you're going to create hate or backlash because the fans expected you to go, right? This is not true. The fans do not expect you to go because one, fans are already attracted to your progressive persona specifically. They want representation because they see the same features within them and yourselves. They see relatability because they have the same struggles as you do. They understand what everything you're going through, but you're also their inspiration and their motivation to go on, right? All the more reason for them to not want you to go and to stay consistent with your progressive persona. But second, fans from progressive countries already voted in those cabinets that declared the diplomatic boycott in the very first place. That means it's more in line. But furthermore, even the conservatives do not like China, right? Because this directly threatens their domestic trade, their trading like rivals and so on and so forth. But thirdly, fans are used to athletes having strong individualism. This isn't something that's new. This is something that's already happened. Even in basket, you have athletes taking a stand for Black Lives Matter and so on and so forth. That means that you will be less forgettable as an individual. So it means after your athlete career has already ended, your impact extends and you can explore other career options after you're done, right? So there's more benefit there. But even if in the very worst case, this is an actors debate, right? We don't know how we've given to you multiple layers regarding how this is very important to the individual. We think that it's all the more important that you prioritize your personal stance in comparison to all these other benefits that are inexclusive and you can also achieve anywhere else. For all these reasons, we propose.
Thank you for the final remark. Now to close the case of opposition, calling upon the third speaker of negative team, floor is yours. Here.
Okay, am I audible?
Yep, you're audible.
Okay. I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panels, I think this debate is actually around two main clashes. Firstly, which one will benefit the athlete? And also secondly, what about the politics and also combining it with sports? Will it conserve the sports itself and will it be benefiting the sports more? Here's I'm gonna be structuring my speech around clash, so all rebuttals will be integrated throughout. Here's the thing, panels. Let's talk about which one will benefit the athlete first. people that gets into athletic career, people that gets into the sports career are in because they love it, right? They in because they want to do the things that they love as a sport, as a job, as an occupation that can make them live. People that pursue gymnastics, ice skating, name all of it, peak of their career would be to play and to be in the Olympic team, right? And there should be a cause with it. And why is that? Because the outcome from that Olympic sports is just, it's really a big thing for you. Just like how Indonesian weightlifting is really in the spotlight when we get so many medals in the last Asian Games. And this is exactly what would happen if we do the Olympic Games. It will give them a space that they are actually appreciated, and they will gain so many exposures, so many brand deals and everything. And this is how it's going to be beneficial for the athlete, because especially if it's like a really expensive sport, which comes if it's like a really expensive sport, you really need a lot of money to sustain, which really mostly comes from exposure and also from sponsor, and also it is basically for hard to them to live and not to continue their sports just because they don't have even the chance to even try to compete for the most prestigious one in the world right now. And also this is how it creates a flaw in the side affirmative. The affirmative said that the sponsorship is only going to be gained if you win. We say no. Well, actually, when you represent your country too, when you are trying for it, and when you are participating it, you eventually will get this kind of highlight in which that at least there are a chance for you to get this kind of highlight and eventually getting brand deals and also sponsors that can sustain your sport. But in their side of the house, what will happen is that you will have no avenue at all. Because why? Because now, firstly, they don't have the chance to play or even to try out, so that they kept low key, and basically they kept as a wasted potential, because now the only way for you to thrive, the only way for you to stand out is for you to voice your political view. And what if you just don't want to show your political view because you think it's private? Then what will happen in the other side of the house is that it's basically just a pitfall. What will happen for them is that they will become a wasted potential. Because why? Because now they don't have an avenue to play, and they don't think that the sport is a safe space for them, just because they choose to not to state their political view, and then now their whole career is just ruined. And then this is where it gets worse. It's because it's really likely to happen in their side of the house panel. Because why? Because now they have to be into the chaos of politics. Now they have to be involved and also state their political view in order to get the animo of the public, in order to get the sponsorship. Because why? Because as the affirmative said, now the fans love people that are woke, love athletes that have a really concrete political view. But what if they have the potential and they chose not to? It will just bring a pitfall for them. So we have already told you on how it's really not going to be beneficial for the athlete, because it really just giving them it will stop all of these kind of channels for them to get all of these momentums that it's really likely for them to only gain it if they participate in this really big sports competition, namely Olympic Games. And then secondly, let's talk about which one will benefit the sports more. What about the longevity and also the conserving of the sports if politics is combined with the athletics? Panels, actually most people get into sports because they want to get out from the chaos of the politics. From the fans view, from the fans perspective, they just don't really want to hear a lot more about the chaos, and they just want to see how the game is like, and they want to support their go-to athletes. So what will happen is that, what if there are conservative people that is a fan of these athletes? Okay, even if these athletes really voice out their political views, they really don't want to get into the Olympic game because they don't think that it's aligned with their progressivity. But the thing is that there might be conservative people that is a fan of these athletes, and what will happen is that they will corner you, saying how bad you are of an athlete just because you have this specific political view that just and what will happen is that these people are really vocal about their view, meaning that they will point out your flaw just because you support something that is really different from their view of the fence. So what will happen is, again, it's really just a pitfall here and there. So what will happen in the other side of the house is that firstly now you don't continue your sport because you don't want to join this Olympic game. And secondly, what will happen is that now people just basically don't hear about your sports anymore. Because why? Because now the hype is basically dead, and then people that wants to become an athlete really just don't really think twice to become an athlete, because they think that there are so many political interests that intervene with something that they love. We think that, again, the heart of these Olympic Games is about the player, it's about the sports. So why really bother about so many political issues that is basically really subjective? Why we think that it's so many downside coming from it, so many risks that you are taking just because you take this kind of step. And that is why we don't go for we don't want a boycott to happen in our side of the house. We have already also what will happen is that for sports that are really expensive and really expensive, and also really unseen in a way that it's not as popular as like basketball or badminton. What will happen for them is that firstly they don't have the momentum because they cannot join the sport in the first place. Now people just basically don't know what sport that they are playing. They will lose all of these kind of this cash that is flowing for them in order for them to sustain their career. And then what will happen for the longevity is that more people are not unaware of what kind of sport is this. And then firstly, they don't want to get into sports because they don't want to intervene with politics. And secondly, the popularity of the sport that they are interested to is basically become very risky. Because why? Because now there are not a lot of people that wants to pursue it, because the animal is not as high as when we don't boycott the Olympic Games in the first place. What we have proven to you is actually we are the first team in this debate to show you on how it's really bad for the affirmative side to do their mechanism, because we have already proven to you on the two perspective towards defense and also the athletes, and also there's the perspective towards sports in the first place. Hence the arguments coming from the affirmative side can be discredited. We are very proud to oppose. Thank you.
Thank you for the fine speech. Now, to conclude the case of opposition, we're calling upon opposition reply. Floor is yours. Here.
Okay, am I audible?
Yep, you're audible.
Okay. Hold on. Ladies and gentlemen, there are two clashes in this debate. First is which one will benefit the athlete, and secondly, which one will benefit the sports more. On the idea of longevity and conservation, if politics is combined with athletics, right? So on the first clash, we say that the government say to you that the athlete will, have more popularity because they are a political figure, and also an athlete themselves, right? So they will get more brand deals and stuff. But we say to you that these things are dependent, the brand deals and sponsorship are very bound to your achievement and stuff, right? So we think that on this idea, we still can able to negate the affirmative side. So Secondly, is on the idea of which one will benefit the sports more, because the opposition only tells you that Olympics is messed up, and also China is a bad actor and stuff, but they never really explain to you on how will it benefit the sports more, right? So, but in our side, we still can explain to you that people get into sports to get out from politic chaos, right? So we think that it will actually like creating some sort of enjoyment, and also festive ideas of Olympics in itself. So under of these two clashes, we're proud to oppose.
Thank you for the fine remarks. Now to close the debate, calling upon government reply. Floor is yours. You're here.
Am I audible?
Yep, you're audible.
All right, cool. I'm gonna start my speech in 3, 2, 1. This debate should not be about whether an individual progressive athlete can stop China's unjust oppression that is structural, human rights violations are rampant, and so on and so forth, right? Because we don't have the capacity to do that. What we need to debate then is which decision creates better, either A, political fulfillment, and B, economic betterment, right? That's the clash in my reply speech today. First things first, political fulfillment for the athlete. Which strategy allows better political fulfillment for the athlete, right? What did government bring to you? Government brought 3 points. 1, a clear characterization as to who's progressive, and why progressive usually have value that is a huge part of their individuality, talking about why there's camaraderie of the victims' oppression, political party solidarity, and so on and so forth, that creates guilt if they engage to any kind of complacency with with China's Olympic event. Second, that sports cannot be separated from politics because it is utilized as a tool of political powers in the past. But thirdly, the Chinese Olympics is uniquely bad because 1, it is created through horrible condition of the underprivileged. 2, it's usually its profit is usually used to oppress Uyghur and silence any kind of attack and democracy towards the government. And 3, that even if you win, you will be associated with the horrible politically unjust event that is China's Olympics, right? What are the responses from opposition? Opposition's point is only about whether sport is a profit-oriented event and not a political event, with no explanation as to why that is the case. But secondly, they talk about how athletes care about profit only, and therefore they need to attain this kind of, they need to join this event because it's an opportunity loss. How should you weigh this political fulfillment point, right? 2 metrics. 1, characterization. We think that we won on this metrics because we explained to you the step-by-step analysis as to what are the experiences of the athletes, that athletes go through that shapes their progressivity, and how does that progressive value interact with the individuality and everything, right? This is important because the comparative is literally, there is no explanation in opposition as to why they're progressive, why they're inherently important, why that's something that's important for the individuality. But second, we explain to you why China's Olympics is bad when we portray and flesh out all of the harms of Uyghurs and everything, which is literally dismissed by opposition because they only claim that, the athletes join it because they're athletes and everything. This is harmful because the characterization of opposition dismisses the progressive value that is within the inline and the one of the burdens that we need to answer in this motion, which means that at least government is more in touch with the motion, but also government has a better characterization that necessarily means that we take this point to Gov. Second, engagement, right? And there is a severe lack of engagement on the principal ideas from opposition, on which they never explain then what is the burden of proof as to why political fulfillment happens when you engage Olympic, China's Olympic in comparison to if you don't. So at least then it means that our points, at least in comparison, stand strong because there is better engagement as to why sport is a profit, not just a profit-oriented event, but also why athletes need to care about other things. So first clash goes to us. Secondly, economic betterment for the athlete, right? We brought to you points of sponsorships and why sponsorship comes better because there's better brand deals from progressive and mainstream brands, sustainable income, and explain why there are other competitions as a source of profit. Opposition then says that fans want it. but never explain to you how important is this fans, why they will shift, for example, when the athletes that they so much they care about doesn't join one competition, which happened historically. But second, they talk to you about how Olympics is important for sponsorship and winning money. How should you weigh this, right? On the way of impact, you should give it to golf, because in the short term, we explain to you, right, that there is more source of income, utilitarianly, there is more source of income because there's different brands and so on and so forth, which Op never explains why it happens until the very late third speaker. But secondly, long term, we explain to you that we are able to separate ourselves from the sports athletes ideals, because now we're also more than that, which gains us better profit in the future. So in the short term and the long term, we give you better explanation as to why it's likely and better crystallized impact, and very proud to propose.
Thank you for the fine speech. That ends the debate for the last preliminary round of today. Give me several minutes. I'm going to make my verbal adjudication, and when I'm done, I'm going to go back to you guys as soon as possible. And thank you for the debate.